A child cannot necessarily have faith in something that they don't see. A child cannot necessarily have faith in things that they don't hear or know. It's like that in reference to either a slurred vision or a suspended theory or a suspension, even in the hesitation and the anticipation, that fretfulness, that sort of, that way in which the approach may not allow someone sensitive to a fact see it as much as like a child insensitive. That's very an insecurity of many sorts. To look at tolerance. A child is to be autonomous, it is to be omnipotent, omnipotent, and a child is to be incumbent, just like an adult. But you will go ahead through faith and even through spoken reference amongst yourselves and say that a child is to have independence. A child is to seek and become independent. Let me assure you this. No child on planet Earth is independent. So long as if they require to be 18 years and older, that they have a legal pathway, even through banking, like through the credit world, banking credit or finance, to be able to address and adjudicate their 2 feet and a heartbeat. So a child could never be independent as much as you say it, to have faith in it, but never actually reach it. There's no way the child can tolerate it as much as the parent could have faith in it. Because you would be running, scrambling left, right and centre, wondering what the child's doing. How is that possible? Child can't do this, blah, 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 blah. Nobody would expect a child to be independent, and most adults don't have independence. A lot of lands and countries and nations barely even see themselves at a time like this, having vastly improved in their rapid outlook, through all the vast implications that see them, put the framework of analysis and all those auditory fieldworks of recognition, the scope and the persistent scale of reference, and that very spectrum in which even rotates on a goddamn parking meter, and rotates on a flagpole conversation and a flagpole issue, to see independence reign as the way in which to safe-bound and formulate society. Yes, it's a transitory world that we are stepping up to and formally addressing and finding ways to reinvent our economic pathway and the stimuluses that go with it, stimulating as any economy could be. To live, breathe, and also sort of vie as a productive sort, even where the human analysis or the human confines is sort of rapidly deteriorating at the same time, because of the way in which the function of artificial intelligence or productivity takes away the mainstream role of human workplace, or the human work ethic. Time, money, energy, resources, manpower, intelligence, productivity, period. Now, if it wasn't the sort of case, then the tolerance factor would kick in, and you can't tolerate people who talk about independence. Because apart from the fact that adults don't have it, children most certainly don't have it. We don't even have a one-house government. We can't even entertain a world reaching a one-house government. It's absolutely absurd to think that that would have total control over the military. And that is absolutely, utterly impossible because of how militaries and governments don't even sort of only clean up their own act and clean up their own perimeters and backyard. The same way in which we govern our schooling systems and all of the faith and all of the goddamn religion and all of those close negotiations and efforts to finalize the four corners of the world's position on where through international arrangements or what have you, the world vies as not just moving forward, but of course to say we have faith in it, of the way the world's moving forward, but to only put it into the realm and constantly vie and move forward, and to propel as much as revolt through what we know as tolerance. Otherwise, things like zero tolerance measures step up, and not even that has a one-house / independent approach to how people deem credible those sourced estimates, like a transitory fieldwork, like a transitory world, like any fieldwork that requires the substantiation of claim, the application and the responsibility that goes with every viable trait. There's no way to teach faith. You can't teach faith in that in which you can't see or hear. It's like a slurred vision versus a brain spurt. What do you mean a brain spurt? I wouldn't even hear what you see. To say that faith comes by hearing and hearing the word. You know what people are like when they induce and extract. People are like that even in a court of law, where they literally induce psychology and reverse psychology and still at that point don't come up with a solid firmament in which even prosecutors lamentate at the facts put in front of them, and the issue becomes ultimately volatile and facing some kind of an onslaught, be it backlash, every time a judgment is handed down, only for society to never, if not only, learn, so that those mistakes either aren't made by prosecutors at the court bench, or any time that is brought before the public's attention to adhere to what's actually being addressed, for people to have faith in the system and to know that through tolerance measures, just like disciplinary measures, that our world is moving in a forward direction the way in which it ought to be, systematically. The word tolerance is actually outweighing anything that faith can provide a world like this. How can people actually make sense of a world like this? We're even at the heart of other religions around the world. Yes, love and hope is at the core of their life too, even if it's the way in which English language and other derivated communications through European tongues and languages allow other cultures and creeds and communions to be apprehensive of the meaning. It sort of puts it into that field work where they sort of believe it, and they believe it, and therefore it's fundamentally good, pure, and sound to believe in hope and love as a kind of universal way in which the world ought to move forward, if it means at a later date or a later passage, where even once we solve things like love and hope, we can ultimately get to a safer foundation in which to build the entire world, to finally provide that transition, the transmography in a world so needful, and a world so sort of short of graduation, so shy of graduation, so faint-hearted in many approaches, will ultimately achieve it through simple but sure steps of repetition, like those building blocks that needs to sort of start with even like the mold and a piece of it. The word peace that says, okay, well, how the hell can you even achieve peace with or without tolerance? So how the hell could you achieve peace with just mere faith? You cannot have faith that the education system is going to upkeep and maintain your children every time you send them to an institution which we call school, which is no different than a fucking pit of filth and sickness these days. Of headless chickens that are just being forced by the government that say, that the family members even say to the kid, you have to go to school today, otherwise I can't get any money from my pimp. Like the government says, you only get money if you hand your kid over. selling your kid for money to go get them sick and then force them to get vaccines, otherwise you don't get any money. It becomes like a register even to register them to know where they're at and how the regions play out the statistics to move faith and, to move faith, move mountains and to move the statistics like the drovesman's mindset, like the old drovesmen of the past that moved cattle from region to region, rural area to rural area, mountain to shore to lake to land to river to valley to range to rover, back and forth here, there and everywhere to even become that countermeasure of intelligence that sees fluctuating statistics be the greater volatility that poises credible every time the investment sees any individual man, woman and child throw their spanner in the works or their hat in the ring to affect the changes that see that 1 equals a million kind of a seismograph, if not be it a one size fits all, sell one, sell a million approach to the business of the world, or to the scale of approach. If it only means that people have to be more conscientious of their own beneficial pathway, then you can't actually choose who your critics are. You can't choose who your opponents are. You can't choose who your opposition is. You can't choose even the competition of what it is to keep at pace with the person that you perfectly see in the mirror every day. Of how the image in which you create for yourself will either carry you to the heights of success or plummet you to the depths of defeat. We see it with mental disorder. We see it with the way in which image plays a major part in the way in which economy is kept strong. The way in which people look at themselves to determine the kind of pathway in which they see themselves graduate from secondary college and go on to actually literally become pooled numbers in the university. That, like the statistics seen even in the gender factor, both male and female, see university numbers favour more females and foreigners than we actually do see men from a national source. It's absolutely frightening to know that university just isn't even seeing many numbers come through, wouldn't matter what race, colour, creed, gender, culture, period, because of even the affordability factor that families see themselves many years and many moons away from using that as a guide for prosperity, a prosperity guide, to know what it is to tolerate a world in opposed to have faith in the fact. It's no different than being kept within guidelines and instruction, and if you weren't constantly kept within instruction in this world, you won't ever see university. You won't see it because the financial factor will actually make you fall off the chart. It'll make you fall off the rail. You will fall off that basic highway. Like a highway of immunity, basically, that doesn't actually take the foundation from underneath the family. It's because they only sort of get built with a dream code mechanism. They get built with some kind of kaleidoscopic, overbearing, grunged approach, like the generation we live in, where things like depression, anxiety, bloody emo kids, 20th century kinds of culture still trying to coexist but survive in this 21st century, overrun by a digital era that even like artificial insemination, as much as the intelligence, takes away the scope and the absolute goddamn identity of people playing those major field works and the absolute positions of power to see the identity and to see the image in which one forms for themselves as the one in which is going to sort of not just tolerate, like I'm saying tolerate, but even notify, as if they beg to, or if they dare to notice, or, as if they care, if they dare notice, care to notice, that our world is a forever changing dimension of transitory fieldwork. And it just cannot be a prior century. This is not a fallacy world.
And this is where the transitory factors of this world has literally put us into a Pinsett movement, sort of like a transgender equality factor, where we're all being taught to go after an equality feature that sees each other as equal by being able to sit upright and chew food, and that's about it as it is. To seek a doctor's certificate at work and the workplace is no different than having to pull off an extraordinary, highly exaggerated health implication or diagnosis from a challenging doctor or general practitioner to that of your demanding boss, of like an overworked stress syndrome that would see you literally have to almost be buggered. And when I say buggered, I mean literally fucking broken back, head in the sand, in need of desperate chiropractor to be able to pick your broken piece of a goddamn life back up only to do the exact same thing as if the repertoire never expected them to fall off the goddamn incline, to fall off that pathway from woe to go. If it isn't sort of being created within children from the very beginning, then even the statistic as human beings in this 21st century does for any economic-based powerhouse, be it the nation, multifaceted in every international outreach, even communication, period, is be a provision of some sort. Like a provision of worry, like the provision like statistics, and the government just breathe over it like a friggin' worry. They're forced to worry because with every provision it creates a countermeasure intelligence, which they pretend they haven't got over their worry from last century. They've barely caught up with the next one. It's still a goddamn worry. They're not really creating. They've sort of just escaped it, as if reality really sucks to them, and those that live in the artificial intelligence era, the digital world, the graphic world of computers and fucking internet and what have you, right? Helps them escape, like sort of slip into a goddamn corrupted microchip. But it wouldn't even be seen as biographic. It would only ever be seen as people perfectly evading tolerance. Not faith. You only have faith to sort of exit a 20th century analog disposition that had to be sowed. You had to overcome the predisposition of an analog era to now become to the 21st century, becometh here, to a digital era, a digital code, even through auxiliary, even through the way in which we exchange, even the conversations and the documentations put in print for viable surface analysis and the traits that upkeep and maintain at every step of the way, bit by bit, notch by notch, waxing to that effect. We are constantly, even to this day, because of the constant breaking of those codes and the constant illiteracy factors where countries can't even afford reform policy to keep it paced not just with the advancement of systems recognition and understanding, literacy, but of course the illiteracy factor, of course the disproportionate area of those that even in their common grounds of social life and private health, wealth, and self-determinate lifestyle, livelihood, right? A massive predisposition at stake. Because like what we purchased at the start of the year could be a goddamn smartphone, but by the end of the year, 12 months later, they've come out with the next series, like an S6 up to an X7 in the Samsung Galaxy range. Then the S8, with a goddamn edge on the side, might cost you an extra 100 as opposed to a flat one. The money gets taken out, the ideology factor has got nothing to do with it. We basically predicted the radical ideology well before reality kicked in. It is never a thing about money, and it is never a thing about even literacy or the ability to sit upright and chew food amongst each other, to even sort of warmly but surely see yourself through it while the world sort of molds itself into a precast environment, like a social milieu, right? That fortifies you strong to even be seen fit with a heart that pumps faith. ready for that challenge and to tolerate it even to a degree where the tolerance would never ever kick in until like those things like love and hope would ultimately, and I'm telling you, it would have to, ultimately eradicate and dispel itself off that platform which we forge and form and fortify and ultimately familiarize like family to take on space and to take on chemistry, to take on the 21st century prototype citizenship that is well regarded in the eyes of those that even sees digital technology meet the health, wealth and self-determination of human beings fit to roll out through the institutions and the hallmarks of society and the chronology like the health of people as much as the recompense for every shortfall and mismanagement, basically the gainsay of all of it. Doubt if you must, but as daunting and as skeptical as people can always be, right? We can't be a fusspot and worry all the time because, of course, unless those things are sort of handled every step of the way, you should just expect people to notify through basic briefing, like going back to what it requires, to just sort of get back, just hop on the monkey bars and roll with it. No different than the consumer right and responsibility that doesn't have a faith in the world to affect the way in which people expect even the ratification of areas that see social disruption get, overtaken by politics and the humanitarian factor, pull drive a very slight percentage of minority seekers in this world, dominate the margin of even omissive fieldworks of recognition via the federal bureaucracy and the parliamentarians, to coexist in a world that would see the rest of it pop off, but just like, a minority in opposed to the major jarred up. A planet is jarred, we just 24/7 revolve. Get rid of the jar and just be kept with a lid. They just become a lid. They'll say, put a lid on it. You'll say, catch situation. What comes first, the bird or the egg? The egg or the chicken? Well, it actually requires the nest. You have to have a nest before you even think about a bird or an egg. The nest is like a sump in a car where the gearbox, the oil. Unless you've got a sump, it's like breakfast. You've got to have a right sump. You've got to make your sump right so that all the oil and crap during the day, even the leftover from yesterday, can keep at pace and have the oil rolled over so that you make fresh, you have to make good soil or stool or whatever you call it, sit on it, yeah, it could be the fruit sometimes that is the fucked up difference. Or just eating dead animal carcasses for breakfast like pig and chicken. Sometimes it's more difficult to notify authorities, let alone to contact parents to have your children picked up, because even on an international level of safe harbouring somebody else's child, to ask for pig and chicken for breakfast or for some kind of animal could be an area, could require a general practitioner to check for mental health issues. Or to first and foremost see if it was frothing at the mouth to go search for a mallet or a shovel to put it out of its misery. It wouldn't do much for the immunosystem. It's like sort of like you wonder why it falls through your butt like that, falls through the pupil, like your pupils. You wonder what your third eye is. They say that the brains are in the butt. Apple a day keeps the doctor away. What the core is, to never suffice that. Do you say catch? What catch? The internet itself was all designed purely in the beginning to coincide alongside, or to be there like a rubbish bin for the websites. If you know what website you're logging into, then you go straight to the website. You don't call it the internet. The internet is like sifting through a rubbish bin for information. The internet is like a bug catcher. The internet is like a filtration system, and you see that as it's called, they filter it through Google. It is a net, a bug catcher. It catches all the leaves out of the pool. It's the rubbish bin to the cyberspace. So the fact that even media would pick up something on the internet in a country like Australia means that, like a country so poor for story like Australia, they would just sift around in a fucking rubbish bin and look for something they can legally pluck out and use for a time slot. It's very poor driven and pathetic to know some countries that don't source the story and don't source the information and go on to talk and act like they're the primary source and the good news source and the good news hub, to talk about it even in a fantastic way that puts it at the perspective of society, to know that what they're getting is bang for the buck. But what they probably get is bed knob to broomstick. So that's where you know that in a world like this, those minority factors have become so far-fetched from reality that they will sort of see themselves finish the race. It's all over before it starts, and that's how telepathy works. How can you have faith in telepathy? Question. How can you have faith in telepathy? Can you tolerate telepathy? Or to say, can you have faith in tolerance? Can you tolerate telepathy? Does telepathy, like telecommunication, any telly's a very difficult word for people to understand why we need it. It's like knowing full well that you can't expect to sort of be back home before you go out. You can't sort of be interrupted doing what you're doing. At the same time, you sort of can't have propulsory measures implanted in your head. Sort of like the question about love itself. You can't have it implanted in your head what love is, or what you must have and what you must sort of, you must have love, you must seek it, you must have it. It's like saying you have to have faith. You can't bash people like Bible bashers to say you can have faith. But the problem is that might not always be the church's fault. Of course it is in a lot of cases. But the family household, revolving the society, the Western world around families and relationships, or the common statistic, the common popular belief. Families actually make it perfectly to the outlook of any person in the house that they must get a relationship, they must have love, they must have faith. You must have it, and they haven't even discovered it. They haven't even sourced it, and so the world sort of backs itself into a corner, no different than the private lives of families. The world slowly becomes a family, and you've become very private, and it's just not so together as you might like to believe it. Democracy is not communism, because communism is at pace with communication, and democracy is more at pace with the private cyberspace reality, very private, very friendly, very secret, very classified, too damn private, like family. It's different when you sort of see no family run the place, in opposed to communism, to see the family actually overrun the whole friggin' thing. So to know that democracy only actually works within households is like saying, well, you can't make every goddamn household the same. That would just be impossible. It would be utterly impossible, because you would never even prepare people to tolerate it. You would just have an open door policy where people could extort them every day. The same way in which households break up. The same way in which you can serve false papers on people and have them kicked out, and even have the bank repossess their house or their car, or have an unwarranted activity formed against a family that sees people in boys in blue or agencies just sift through every cupboard because supposedly they've got a right to just go snooping around in your cupboard, like a group of fucking insurgents, which they say insurgents. It wasn't a group of insurgents, it was people in fucking pajamas. And they were still yawning because they hadn't had a cup of tea. They were readily identified as 2 adults and 3 children, 2 dogs and a bird in a cage. It was the Iraqi uniform. It's like having no food in the cupboard even when you're wiped out by something that just came through and fucking fucked off with it. It's over before it starts. And then you got a supplied dossier, even a 25,000 one, even when Saddam Hussein was actually alive and in power. About what the fuck was he up to? What is he actually doing? Is he a despot tyrant? Is he a friggin' evil person? Could he ever be saved? Could he be a Christian? Could Idi Amin ever change? Could he be a Christian? Could he be a good person? After all, he's the King of Scotland. You know, could General Ahmed, could this one anything? These people that overlook some of the despots in the world, and to know that despotism is basically just people with unlimited power to basically just push their way through to whatever. For whatever reason, that wouldn't even be tolerable. So you wonder why a world to this day sees even all your shit gone. No real faith that there'll be fucking breakfast cereal on the shelf tomorrow, but, you know, it's not there, so the insurgents must have came through the fucking house and stole all your motherfucking things. You can kill all those motherfuckers, I ain't got no insurgent friends. To say that it'd be your upkeep, your hope and joy and everything that you ought to sing and dance about. To even satisfy the remark that a 21st century will see itself at some stage dancing and singing and basically, you know, moving to the same tunes and the same temperances and faiths and qualities and sobering lifestyles that basically endure most things and endure everything tolerable as it would have to be. To even be a bad person to take on the bad thing, like any foul thing you hear on the radio, to sort of wish you'd never heard it, but only, you know, and of course, go back and, you know, have to face the courage and all the social indifferences with it, like a transitory world, only to find that good person yourself, and then sort of have enough time in a preparatory sense to sort of get yourself back within like an SD card to make sure it doesn't corrupt, or your battery so your battery doesn't seize and froth up like your mouth that's looking for bacon and eggs, and sort of, you know, sort of like turn your phone off at the same time the way you would your car, and maintain the vehicle, not have it overheat, and get back up ready to do the day by day, day in, week out, month in, year out thing, through uniformity, that even has bilateral decision and unilateral decision, you know, play second and third rate to what we ultimately know as collateral decision, which is no different than both, let's say, husband and wife, or co-founders of a company, or business partnerships, or two people in a vehicle that have to, you know, negotiate even the traffic laws of two-way traffic with white lines down the middle to make sure that you don't sort of just slip over one side or the next. To know what it is to give enough indication so that even for people left, right and centre, to see that the way in which you negotiate the traffic is never seen by fucking faith, because you can't trust one driver from the next. But that it's tolerable because you only expect people to tolerate each other. Just like the one you coincide with in the way like collateral is the entire world in which you base the foundation of your future on. It's no different than clockwork mechanisms. How the hell can it ever be a faith-founded, faith-built concentration of 24/7 upkeep, 365 form application, product, you know, application, the works, on a world that dominates an ultimate salvation that is, I guess, any just reward as a result, independence. Genesis chapter 1 verse 2 says, the world was without form and void. Why would it be without form and void if it meant that faith is the victory? Because it probably meant that there wasn't even faith at the time, even through God's eyes, to formally recognize what you are imaginating, what you are pioneering. It would only meant that it's tolerable to create you, therefore create the platform, or to create that place. Tolerable as if to create you to allow you to be free enough to even imaginate and pioneer against the heavens and earth. To create a firmament above your head like the heavens and earth, like the sun and the ground. When you walk out the side, the sun above your head, let there be light, heaven and earth, the surface. And how you take yourself out into that transitory world. Or your economic life. It's all economic. If it wasn't economic, then that's why the Bible wouldn't have said without form and void, because it is without form and void because it is economic. It's like saying, well, you got economy class in the same Airbus as first class. But then at the same time, like school, like institution, you have something called constitution. But it's the same platform, the same Airbus, the same space ride, the same spaceship, the same way we're going. Institution and constitution on the same bus. It's the same as first class and economy on the same bus, and the whole world revolves itself around strong economic management. It's all about economy. Separating the first class, but you're all on the same bus, is no different than the tax measures. And even to throw the fucking church of the Trinity Church, the Trinity, the great golden fucking illustrious fucking golden part of Trinity, look like an absolute Mother Earth travesty, because faith predetermines outcome. If you're on the same bus, like the Airbus, and you are nosediving, I can assure you that people in the military, even if 13 members on the fucking plane were from a fucking golden military, a golden Trinity church, wouldn't give two stiff shits, even a cyber hacker part of the anonymous group, to tail shaft your ass and watch you go fucking receive help from a dolphin. Because it overrides the analysis. The one that says it's without form and void like a zip code. It's without form and void like a barcode. What's a gash without a scratch? Yeah, void if removed, but if you even just one little bit, it'll change the dynamics of everything. Even the ability for you to drive a car out of the car yard, bought at $33,990, drive away, no more to pay. You lose a third of the value just like that. Get one tiny little scratch, and you throw the price of the vehicle off $4,000 or $5,000, even though it doesn't even change the dynamic of the vehicle. People still see it that way through markup. Oh, but it's got a little scratch here. I won $1 million. Oh, but this part, it says void if removed. I just bought this same packet of crap at your supermarket. Yes, but this is the after hours petrol station. You must pay double. It defeats the purpose. The purpose that says faith predetermines outcome. Now, what would tolerance predetermine? Tolerance predetermines instruction. You can't see things as already over before it starts. There is no outcome. The wind could bloody change. You could be blah, 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 blah before you know it. Oh, geez, the weather changed. The ground was shaking. You could be sitting around twiddling your thumbs, and then the ice cream truck, you hear it for the first time in God knows, and just out of the blue. dropping everything, screaming, running for an ice cream truck. You stop everything and go get some unforeseen costs from your mum and dad to get some money and go get an ice cream. And it'll change your economy. Not just the financial factor of everything in the way in which economy upkeeps itself. So ultimately I'll just finish it here like this. If it means that economy is the engine like the car and ecology is like the interpreter or the operator like the goddamn terminology, the instructor's manual, or like the way in which we make an artificial intelligence or a voice signature verification or a verbal command thing happen in technology, then how does that take away the productivity of a world that even I don't know, well, computers don't, like, see, blood makes poor mortar. And yet the dead make none. The body asks questions that the head simply doesn't. Your body will ask questions that your head simply doesn't, that your brain doesn't. And that's what it's like with artificial intelligence, to even go a certain way and have faith with it. The head, like the mouth, bridles the entire body. It's no different the way in which bacteria in the mouth help safeguard the health of your heart, because it's all linked up to arteries that go straight directly to your heart and your bloodstream. So you can't expect people to even take artificial intelligence seriously a lot of times. Because yes, it's lovely and it's absolutely it's where we need to go. You can't deny what artificial intelligence is going to do forever. It absolutely is here in the world to stay, and it really, really should, absolutely. But like children to survive in the world, to say the body asks questions the head simply doesn't, you can't expect to sort of educate children but not equip them even with areas of intelligence like, you know, like digital sophisticated technology to work on their behalf. The brain simply shouldn't have to, if it means like in an automated fashion. It actually would provide that option to even give children a safe pathway through credentials and credit application to even negotiate public transport and all the options available to provide a child safety in a world, even within an area that allows, that the parents or the family allow, even through applications or barcodes or chips to see them operate from either school to home or within a 500 meter radius or a 2 kilometer radius, never to, you know, and then, you know, let's just say something happens instantly. There needs to be credit options available for children so that they can literally instantly access taxis. Literally options so that kids can have these advanced, you know, can have the, can feel as safe as adults too. And basically like the security and stability, but like the economy and the ecology, take away less thought and less, take away infringement. Take away the infringement factors or, you know, from all citizens, so that less faith and more tolerance, so that through tolerance you will ultimately sort of have faith rest well within you. It would swallow it up, and it would just be something that your heart magnifies faith, and it basically allows your body to face more tolerable outcomes and to tolerate, you know, that which may or may not. It's no different than, I guess, the pathway of instruction or guidelines to be kept within it. You have to be in subject to all things You have to be in subjection to all things and still live, even when you are being preoccupied by an invading army that wishes to pro-dominate the way in which the society is spelling itself out, even whilst you don't even know it yourself. You still have to be civilly responsible as much as politically and socially responsible for every area, and even park break on the estimates to see you exercise restraint in your material standard of living. Even the kind of, mateship consequences that forge itself through faith-driven impulses, rather than the compulsory standard of civil society and upkeep, which you've got to be able to tolerate, otherwise you will see the madness of where the 1980s, prior 20th century, saw corporate meltdown like the easiest thing to forecast. And the 1990s talk about zero tolerance because after so many years of statistical analysis of where it was going, zero tolerance, this could end up being global, the amount of the pathway of artificial intelligence and the faith in people to stick with it and still not resolve the social psychology or even the constitutions of many countries that can't even afford legislative reform in the face, wake and self-determined pathways of G5 nations that are trying to wrap it up and solve it for the sake of dominating the industrial pathway and the industrial negotiations of 21st century civil prototype planetarians or centurions, human beings, whatever. The highlighted simplicity of poverty is an onslaught against the concepts. The highlighted simplicity of all poverty, that we are born into the world with nothing. We rely on being taught the concept of having to basically tolerate it. It's an onslaught against human thinking, even the bodies and everything that we have to maintain, even the system's protocol and even all of the energy sources and the crises that damage the integrity, even through having to defend its pathway and see it stand as a viable economic option to just keep society ticking over, whether it just be the survival of the human race for centuries and centuries to come, as we blast ourselves into the universe and the galaxy, as if that's ours to also pioneer and to strive to succeed with, the world being a massive success wheel that you would be very hard-pressed and dim-witted to not want to dream big or not want to see the world we live in today through the eyes of children, no less than the innocence of them, as a wonderful world tomorrow, or something that even as an elder or as a generational leader just absolutely just mind-boggle you, and actually inscript, not just conscript, obviously, you got to be here, but inscript everyone. Kids spin us out as much as they spin us in. And we spin them out as much as we spin them in. Or we spin ourselves out as much as we spin ourselves in. It's like that with work. You spin yourself into work, you spin yourself out. And the moment you come home, you got to put up with the kids that come home.